Hello, my friends. Welcome back. I'm JC, and this is Grace Overflowing. Today, I want to switch things up just a little bit. As most of you all know, up to this point, I have shared a lot of the dreams that the Lord has been giving me over the last few months. On this channel. But today, at the Lord's leading, I want to share a testimony, a particular testimony that I think really applies to the situation that many of us Christians find ourselves in relating to this election. As I've told you, I truly believe that the Lord is working, and I've had dreams that I believe have confirmed in my heart that in the end, President Trump will prevail, that no matter what level of corruption has happened in this election. And watching the press conference that was actually this week, where the lawyers came forth with an abundant amount of proof that this has gone on at a massive scale, that regardless of all that the Lord is still sovereign, and that his righteous right hand will prevail and make things right. So with that, I want to tell you a little bit about probably one of the most trying times in my whole life. It was, I would definitely say, the hardest time in my life. I was in an abusive relationship. And in fact, I wasn't just in the relationship. I was engaged to be married, and really at a point where I knew how toxic the relationship was, and it was needing to come to an end. It was unraveling, and it was just really difficult. I mean, I was struggling in a way that I had never before in my life. Like many abusive relationships, I had become isolated from my friends. I had kind of lost my family because of this relationship, and I just felt alone. And knowing that this relationship was also going to end, I felt like I had no one. Now, this was before I really had a relationship with the Lord. I had known about Christ. I had been brought up in a home that, my grandfather actually took us to church when we went. So I knew of Jesus, and I had gotten saved when I was younger, but I certainly didn't really embody the life of a Christian until way later in life. And actually, this was sort of the inciting event, my experience with God that I had never had before. I didn't know scripture. I didn't know that when you have an impossible situation, that's when you have an amazing experience with the Lord. And so I really wasn't expecting deliverance. But I had stepped out in faith at this time, trying to regain some sense of control of my life. And I had put money down on a townhouse to be built. I needed to sell one, so it had a contingency. And this happened all right before the financial crisis of 2008. And so after I had gotten this contract for the new townhouse, I had listed my current one to sell. Everything with the real estate market came to a screeching halt, and suddenly a situation where townhouses were just flying off of the shelves. Literally, there's 20 or more for sale, and none of the units in my subdivision were moving at all. And so suddenly I'm competing with all of these people that just then start doing a price war, because that's how, at that point, you were able to sell and get out. However, I needed a certain amount in order to make the numbers work. So the situation got more dire. The builder that I had written this contract up under, they were patient with me, and they said, listen, we will give you more time. We will work on the other units in your chunk, and we will do yours last. We'll build yours out last. But we need to close your unit before we're able to move on to the next chunk of townhouses, if that makes sense. So At that point, though, they made me come out of pocket with another $10,000, which I didn't have. I thought I would be able to sell my first and be able to make that first payment easily because of selling, but that didn't happen. And so in the end, I had to borrow $10,000 from my boss at the time. And so these stakes just kept getting higher and higher. And here I'm in this relationship. And ultimately, I got a buyer. I mean, right as things just kind of got toward that end, and I'm like, okay, I'm running out of time. What is going to happen? A man came in. He was going to buy a townhouse for his daughter. He was paying cash. It sounded too good to be true. I was ecstatic, so happy. And so they looked at it. They gave me a word of mouth agreement that they were going to buy it. And they left saying that they would be in touch. And so they actually called me again, saying that they wanted to view the property one last time before we get this paperwork underway and just kind of, do the deal. Since they were paying cash, it could be done very quickly. So they had gotten all of their ducks in a row. And so again, I'm like so excited, and I'm like, yes, this is going to happen. And so it was last minute they were asking me about this, and I happened to call a friend of mine who lived in the next townhouse chunk over from me at that time if she could watch my little 5-pound yapping dogs, because I was going to be there on the property with them, showing them the property, and I really didn't want my dogs to be yapping. So I'd called her asking her if she would allow me to bring my dogs over so she could keep them. She told me she couldn't, and that she was not even home. And I said, okay, no big deal. So they ended up coming and they saw the townhouse. And again, the daughter loved it. And this was the townhouse that she wanted. And he gave me another confirmation that he was going to move forward with getting the paperwork together to purchase it from me for his daughter. Now, this is where the story gets interesting and where the hand of God starts moving. So unbeknownst to me at this time, they left my house that day and went out into the parking lot. And my friend that I had called and asked if she could watch my dogs apparently chased them down in the parking lot as they were getting into their car. And she said, come look at my townhouse. Whatever you have agreed to pay her for hers, I will give you a much better deal. And because this guy was a deal guy, he was actually a real estate agent, and he was kind of just all about the numbers. She said, I will let you represent me on my next purchase in Williamson County. So I did not know any of this had happened at all. And so time went by, a couple of days, and I'm waiting to hear back on next steps on how this thing is going to get closed, and how I'm just already planning ahead and, thinking this is a done deal. And I get a call from the man's wife. Apparently, he had no intention of even calling me, of even letting me know what they had decided or what had happened. But at that point, she told me, listen, we're not buying your townhouse. My daughter loves it. This was her first choice, but the father's making the decision. He's paying for it. And this is what happened. And I just want you to know what kind of friend you have. My friends, I hung up the phone and I was crushed. I was truly, truly crushed in that moment. And I realized that I was literally without hope. It had already gotten to a point where it was so close. I had the house on the market for so long, and this was my first buyer, and it just seemed like it was destined. It just seemed like the Lord's hand was on it, and in an instant, it got stolen away from me. And I didn't really know what to say. I didn't know what to do. As a side note, my friend actually had called me after that, and she left a voicemail message. And I just never called her back. I never talked to her again after that. I didn't even I didn't even address it with her. But I just remember at that point really, really feeling the gravity of my situation, knowing that even though I wasn't one to just pray about things, even though I hadn't asked the Lord, is this what you want me to do? He didn't necessarily guide me in the direction of building this townhouse to begin with. I just remember sitting down on my couch shortly thereafter I got that call and knowing that it would take a miracle. It would take a miracle for all things to work out. I mean, I had less than a week, and it had already been months of me waiting for this fire. And I didn't have a Bible at that time. I did. It was the King James Version, but I don't even know that I knew where it was. But what I did have was a copy of the Jesus Calling devotional. And I just remember going and getting it and opening it up to that day, whatever it was, and it just spoke to me in such a miraculous way. And I think that the Bible verse that was connected with it was the one that I believe is from Habakkuk, and it's the one that says, I will make your feet like the feet of a deer and enable you to walk on the heights. And so it was very hopeful that quite possibly that this still could work out. But I knew 100% that if it did work out, I wasn't sure, but if it did work out, it would be because of the Lord. It was a miracle of God. And so within a few days, I'll never forget the moment. I was driving in my car, my phone rang, and it was a real estate agent wanting to show the property. And here's where it gets interesting. That same night, they wrote an offer on my townhouse. And the offer that I had received was typed. And I could see very clearly that a unit number was typed in that they wanted to purchase, and it wasn't mine. A line had been struck through that unit number, and my unit number had been written in. And I immediately obviously noticed that and felt like that was an interesting thing. But sure enough, the contract, we were able to negotiate it and we were able to finalize it. And it wasn't until we were about to close and I was meeting their real estate agent for some reason. And he told me what had happened, what had caused this buyer to change her mind on a dime and make a decision to buy my townhouse. So I had a lot of religious imagery, art and whatnot. I'm an artist, and so I've just always felt very drawn to angels and just pictures of Jesus and religious artwork. And so apparently when she was on her way to look at the townhouse that they had written the offer on, she said, I happened to go online and I saw one more that I might want to look at just before we put the offer in. And so that's when I got in the call. And immediately when she walked in and she saw all of my artwork and all of the presence of, Jesus in my townhouse, she said she believed it was a sign from God that was the one for her. And so she ended up buying my townhouse instead of the other one. And so, friends, not only did I know beyond know, like that my circumstances were so dire and I had so exhausted my own efforts and time had beyond run out. I mean, I had minutes left to make this work. And I knew that it would never ever happen unless God moved in a major way. Not only did I already know that in my heart, and so when it worked out, I mean, it was very clear. But then on top of it, for the Lord to go a step further and confirm that with me, just confirm it. It meant everything to me, friends. And here's the deal. Obviously, I was so thankful and glad that this worked out, for me on earth. But what it really did was it gave me an experience with the Lord that I would never forget. And if the first person who was planning to put an offer down, if that sale had worked out, I wouldn't have had that. I wouldn't have had that. And so all of this to say is that when the enemy tries to come against us, and when the enemy tries to intervene and he tries to take, something from us that the Lord has for us, many times the Lord will allow it. He will pull back his hand just momentarily. He's got ground rules. He's got ground rules, but he's got a plan. He's got a plan that is so much bigger and accomplishes so much more according to his purpose. He's thinking big scale, like he's thinking eternity here, not just this 5 minutes, not just what I really need in this moment on earth. And so I hope that encourages you that, I truly, truly, truly would never, ever, ever change the way that happened. And in fact, while I have had just abundant favor from the Lord in my life, there have been certain points in my life that were hard, that I struggled, that I endured a Goliath, if you will, and I was helpless, in that moment without God, and God had come through for me each and every time. And what it has done is it strengthened my relationship with him and my trust in him, because he is not just some essence in the clouds. It's not just reading the word of God that's like a bunch of stories that you're supposed to learn lessons from. Like, he's real. He is more real than the physical that's around us. And he is active and he moves in our life, and he wants us to see him. He wants to see evidence of his hand, because he wants relationship with us. And so I just wanted to share that with you. So whether it's related to this election and, knowing that there's been corruption, I just say stand firm, with your trust in Christ alone. Don't give up. Keep moving forward. Keep trusting. Keep waiting with patient endurance, as I've said before. And I believe that the Lord's will prevail. And with corruption, he often brings it to light. I believe that that's the way that he has worked in my life, and the way that he's worked even in the Bible. In closing, I want to remind you guys of the story of Job. The Lord also put this in my heart. Obviously, you all know the story that he was a wealthy man. He had the hand of the Lord upon him in all that he did. He had abundance and he had a wonderful life until the Lord allowed the enemy to tempt him. The Lord took his hand back just momentarily so that the enemy could tempt him. And because of that, Job slowly lost everything on earth that was dear to him. However, he always remained faithful to the Lord, even when he had some friends that were actually frenemies come into the picture and try to put him down and make him feel that he was unrighteous and that he had brought all of this upon himself. They were there to support him, but in fact, they were just planting lies that he could have easily believed. But he didn't. He didn't believe the lies. He resisted, and he kept stating his case over and over again, that the Lord was righteous and that he loved the Lord and he served the Lord and that, he trusted the Lord. He never swayed from that. And so as you're watching the media, which hopefully you're not watching a lot of that, I know I'm really trying to limit that. And if you are watching the media, my advice to you would be, try to find one that is a little bit more two-sided as opposed to some of the mainstream news sources that are out there. But he didn't let these three enemies change his perspective. He didn't buy their lies. He didn't cave. He remained faithful and grounded in the Lord, no matter what it appeared that he had lost, no matter how much suffering he had to endure. And then at the very end, when he was speaking to the Lord and talking about kind of what had really happened here, he said to the Lord, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. And so this is the gospel truth, friends. What Job is saying is something we should cherish, that if there has been something lost here that was the Lord's, it will be regained. We may not know exactly how things are going to pan out. I trust that it will work out as I believe the Lord has told me. But at the end of the day, what the Lord says will prevail. One last thing I wanted to point out about this particular part of Job, it's the 42nd chapter, was that everything that the enemy took away from Job was restored to him. However, it's interesting that it happened just after Job prayed for his enemies, or his frenemies, or whatever you want to call them. So he prayed for them for the forgiveness, that the Lord would forgive them for the way that they had treated him, because the Lord said he was angry at the way that they had treated Job. But Job prayed for them, and the Lord forgave them. And immediately it goes into verse 10 of chapter 42. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends, and the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then came to him all his brothers and sisters and all who had known him before, and ate bread with him in his house. And they showed him sympathy and comforted him for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. And each of them gave him a piece of money and a ring of gold. Now, one thing I want to mention about that is that when it says that the Lord had brought upon him, what that really means is that the Lord had lifted his hand. The Lord had allowed Satan to tempt Job, but ultimately it was the Lord's power that brought everything back to Job, because he remained faithful and he remained committed to him, and he never spoke out in anger, and he never blamed God. He just moved forward in faith and hope that the Lord would rectify all that was coming upon him. And in the end, sure enough, he did, and he got a double portion of blessing. So with that, I just want to leave you encouraging you not only to pray that whatever is going on with this election in our country, the divide, the fact that there seems to be such dishonesty through our election process, so much corruption, that it would be revealed, the corruption would be revealed. And I am literally at this point, I am just praying for a smoking gun, because it seems very clear that many people are denying that the evidence that currently exists, that are people's, claims, words, word of mouth, and there's hundreds of them, they're totally denying that and dismissing it all as lies. So I'm at this point where I'm really praying for a smoking gun. I'm praying for evidence, hard evidence, black and white documents that just show, whatever has been done, that those things will surface in a supernatural way, that the Lord's angels will be working behind the scenes, making sure that those come into the light. But also, friends, I just want to encourage you to pray. Pray for your enemies. Pray for those who have acted out against this election, those who have been bullying, those who have been treating a lot of the election workers unkindly and are responsible for a lot of the circumstances that, have ultimately led to a lot of illegal activity as it relates to the election. Just pray for them. pray for their souls, pray for their forgiveness, ask that the Lord will put his hand upon them. And ultimately, the status of their souls and the status of their hearts and the status of their eternities is so much more important than the outcome of this election, because as we all know, the Lord is sovereign and he works through all situations. He can work through a righteous king. He can work twice as well through an unrighteous king, because he will prevail. So anyway, I hope that this message has encouraged some of you. I want to leave you with one quote that I found related to the subject of testimony that really it was impactful to me. And you may have seen it before. I had never seen it, so I want to share it with you today. And it says, only God can turn mess into a message, a test into a testimony, a trial into a triumph, and a victim into a victory. And so I just hope that my testimony has spoken those words, that in our times of trial, God does the greatest work, and it is literally priceless. It is worth every bit of misery, every bit of suffering. And as it relates to Job, it kind of confirms the same thing. And I would like to add on to it that only God, through our misery, can give us a ministry. And so with that, I'm going to leave you. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, may the Lord bless you and guide you and fill you with his perfect grace overflowing. Thanks for watching.